Alrighty folks, we're going to get started with renewable power. Now, renewable energy is a complex sea of technology. So what I've got for you here is your notes outline, and there's stuff that I've started for you, the general mind map of things, and then you're going to fill in the research on the pros and cons. Let's go ahead and get started with wind power. There's a few basic types of wind power. Of course, you got windmills. You're right, varying sizes. There's 2 megawatts all the way up to 12 megawatts, and they can be land-based or sea-based. So that's what we have here. We got wind power, we got land-based windmills, and sea-based windmills. Okay? There's pros and cons to each. Now, there's a kind of a new player on the market, which is vertical building-based windmills, which are a completely different shape, and they can be put on buildings in major metropolitan areas. Now there's some of these coming out of Japan that actually will withstand typhoon force winds, and there's 3 vertical windmills on top of a pivot and they all spin. There's a lot of crazy stuff out there, but all of these have pros and cons. There's wind. Now, hydroelectric used to just be hydroelectric dams. Now, hydroelectric dams were created in England, I believe in the 1800s, and they've evolved all over the world. Russia, France, here in the United States, all over the place. There's different designs. Now there's a lot of information out on those older dams. Now there are also giant mega dams like the Three Gorges Dam in China, which is an absolutely colossal project. And that's probably what you're familiar with is hydroelectric dams. However, there's other players in the game. There's tide generators, which are just set into the sea, and essentially a windmill that works with fluid, with a liquid fluid. Now there's also seawalls, which takes the concept of tide generators and the concept of hydroelectric dams and kind of mixes the two together. It is technically tidal power because it's using a high side and then running through the generator on the low side, and then when that fills up, the sea decreases when the tide goes out, and then you've got water pressure built up behind the seawall and then goes back through the generators. So it's still a form of tide power, even though it's using a wall very similar to a hydroelectric dam. There's also wave generators. There's many types of wave generators, and there's pros and cons to all of those. Geothermal power. There's really not a whole lot to say about this because there's not a ton of geothermal systems in the world in use today, and there's not a whole lot of places in the world where you can do geothermal power, so there hasn't been this great evolution of different systems. But there are pros and cons to this one as well. One of the cons being that you can't do it anywhere. It has to be a very specific place. Now, solar power. You're probably familiar with solar panels. The photovoltaic effect, PV, that was discovered by Einstein. I mean, it's been a minute, okay? And there's been a long evolution of solar panels, increasing efficiency, multiple layers, using multiple wavelengths of light, things like that. Solar panels today are far, far, far better than what was even around even 10, 15 years ago. And it's got PV. These are photovoltaic systems. Any form of solar panel has pros and cons, but these are photovoltaics. Now you can also get solar collectors. CSP has to do with concentrated solar thermal. That S is actually 2 words. It's hyphenated. Solar thermal power. Concentrated solar thermal power. And there are different types of, there's solar collector arrays, there's solar collection towers, and they create or they harness the heat from sunlight, and then they heat oil and generates power that way. And those have pros and cons. Now, with all of these different methods, the 4 big categories that I've listed for you are wind, hydroelectric, geothermal, and solar. Those are the 4 big categories. Now, when you're looking at pros and cons in your research, there's a lot to think about. There's going to be people that just don't like it, or that it seems out of the ordinary, or their whole con for all of these is that it takes attention away from fossil fuels or something like that. There's good pros and cons, and there's silly pros and cons, and there's absolutely nonsense pros and cons out there. And you're going to see all of it when you do your research. All of the nonsense of the world can be found on the internet, but so can all the knowledge of the world. So, you have to be discerning in your research. But here's the things that I want you to look for in particular when you look up all these things. Lifespan. How long does a hydroelectric dam last? Really? Do they last forever? Or they only last like 100 years tops? Maybe they only last 50. So you need to decide that. Land area use. Is it really taking up a colossal amount of land? Is it, if we go this route, will we have no open land left? Or maybe can we do agriculture underneath windmills? But maybe if we fill it with water, then we can't do agriculture or housing or anything like that. So those are the things I want you to think about. Impact on wildlife. If there's one thing that you learn in my class, I want you to understand that all things are connected. Everything's going to have an impact, okay? So start looking up the impact on wildlife. Efficiency. This has been one of the big knocks on solar power for a long time. And it's something that everyone's going to have to look at with all forms of power. How efficient is it? Versus the energy that comes in, how much electricity do we get out? And is that valuable information? Startup cost. How much does a 2 megawatt windmill cost versus how much does a hydroelectric dam cost? Right? Those are the things that you got to think about. If mankind is to invest, what kind of investment are we looking at? In dollars, in time. Can they be recycled or upgraded? What happens? What do we do with a hydroelectric dam that's past its prime or that has too many problems that we can't seem to fix, or that's silted up at the bottom because it wasn't built with slush gates in it like the Three Gorges Dam? What do we do with it? Can we upgrade it? Can we fix it? Can we make it better? Can we recycle it somehow? Maybe not. Can you recycle a solar panel? Can you just rewire and put new blades on a windmill? Can you fix the blades? Can you rewire it, put a more efficient motor in there, or a more efficient generator, and then kind of upgrade those things? Or is it just trash after that? Can they be recycled or upgraded? That's important to know. At the end of this unit, what I want you to do is be able to make your own informed decision. You have to be informed for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what I think. I don't want you to go with what other people think on this. I want you to get informed, make your own beliefs, and then make a decision. If mankind was to invest in some form of renewable energy, should it be a single one of these or all of these, and why?